So what did you guys do during the off season to prepare for the game reveal?
Okay, so our off season usually consists of skills development. So last year especially, we took on like what, four new members to our team. So it consisted of a lot of skills development for our new members and also just like advancing the skills of our more like senior members. So this was like CAD and code workshops for some of the newer people. We got a CNC machine over the off season,
Nice.
so everyone like figured out how to do that. And then it also consisted of like preparing some documentation for later in the season. So just getting some documents ready to be filled out like once we knew what the game was. So this like kind of helped with our design process later.
My team last season, what we did, we wanted to like build a full robot in 3 weeks and then try to adapt that into a robot for qualifiers. This season, we're more hoping to just get it right the first time, which has definitely
Yeah.
worked out a lot better.
Yeah, that was something we had wrestled with in the past too, kind of like rushing our robot design. So for center
Mhm.
stage, like we took a lot more time to make sure that the robot was like fulfilling certain requirements. And this is all in like all the documentation we wrote, like what like requirements our robot needed to meet, like things it had to be able to do. And then once we identified that, it was like really easy to, I don't know, make it happen. So that's how we were able to get it. Like we're our first iteration of the robot was like pretty close to the final iteration. It was like it didn't
That's good.
really change too much after that.
Yeah, because the biggest problem my team had last season was we had an iteration and then our next iteration would be completely different. The next iteration would be completely different after that. Like we had a decent robot for states and we got to Worlds through Inspire. So and then we completely rebuilt our robot for Worlds. And it was like
Yeah.
the only time we had an actually really good working robot was at Worlds.
That happened for us in power play, except it did not go well.
Mhm,
We rebuilt our entire intake for Worlds and it did
mhm.
not go well.
How did you manage your time so that you always had a robot that was ready for competition?
Okay, so one thing we had realized in the past was coding the robot takes a lot of time. So the mistake we used to make was putting too much effort on making sure like everything was like ready mechanically, and then we that took up way too much time, and then we didn't have enough time to like code it and do autos. So we sort of set like a checkpoint for when like the mechanical design needed to be done, like a hard stop, and that's usually like approximately about a month before our first tournament. And then in between then, we kind of used like other scrimmages as a checkpoint. By the first scrimmage, we need to have like certain key elements of our robot done, and then we sort of like adapted after that.
And what improvements did you make to your design process and time management between last season and now?
We felt that this year there was a lot more things we needed to like actually prototype out and test
Mhm.
before we could make any decisions about what our final design was going to look like. So I wouldn't really call that an improvement, but it was definitely like a significant shift from how we usually do things.
And how did you adapt your chassis to design changes?
Most of our subsystems were like pretty modular, meaning that you could just pull out an entire module, like the entire dropper, the entire intake, with just a few screws. So that means that changing that subsystem didn't really impact the chassis too much. So I'd say for the most part, our chassis stayed the same, and then changes to the subsystem like didn't impact where it was mounted or how it was mounted.
What are you looking to innovate on this year for Into the Deep robot?
The game seems simple, but I think there's a lot you can do in terms of intaking from the submersible. I would say that's probably the most complex part of this game because you need to know what color sample you're intaking and where you're intaking it from. So that's something we're definitely looking to make extremely innovative and efficient and accurate. One thing I'll tell you is because we had like so many things running, like we were pushing our servo limit and our motor limit, and we had like the huge like articulating arm and the intake. So because we were running so many things simultaneously, the battery died like really fast. So that was the reason we
Okay.
actually lost states. Like our robot just literally crashed in the middle of the
Oh,
match.
okay. That's good to know.
So I would say just be very wary of how much battery power you're drawing from like servo usage or how fast you're driving your robot.
Yep.
Don't let that happen.